Imagine this for a second. You sit down at your desk, you've got your morning coffee, and you're just ready to tackle the day.
Right, just a normal Tuesday.
Exactly. And you go to log into the software you use for literally everything. Maybe it's your main analytical tool or your coding assistant, basically the literal core of your entire daily workflow.
The thing you rely on to get your job done.
Yeah. So you type in the URL, hit enter, and instead of your dashboard, you are staring at a completely blank screen with just a single really jarring sentence.
Oh.
Currently unavailable.
Oh, man. Panic mode.
Total panic. But, like, the server hasn't crashed, the company hasn't gone bankrupt, the government has just stepped in and pulled the plug completely, globally.
It is, it's the ultimate digital rug pull. And it's not some hypothetical tabletop exercise either. It is exactly the reality that millions of users woke up to this week.
Right. So, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're unpacking a really wild 72 hours in tech history. We've got this incredibly detailed breakdown from Tech Reader magazine. It's an article by Aaron Rose, published on June 13th, 2026.
That's a fantastic piece of reporting.
It really is. And our mission today is to use that article to look at the unprecedented, wildly short lifespan of Anthropic's Claude Fable 5. We're going to map out this massive collision between national security and tech innovation. And most importantly, figure out what this all means for you if you're building workflows on top of frontier AI.
Yeah. What's fascinating here is that there's a specific category of technology that governments have always historically treated differently.
Okay.
Like, we tend to think of the internet as this borderless, free-flowing environment, right? But when a technology hits a certain capability threshold, like, think about advanced cryptography in the 1990s. Or radar systems before that.
That's sure where the military gets involved.
Exactly. The government steps in. Because the logic is that when a tool becomes so incredibly capable that putting it in the hands of an adversary shifts global risk, well, it stops being a consumer product. It becomes a strategic asset.
Right.
And what happened to Fable 5 is the exact moment AI officially crossed that historical threshold.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the timeline alone is just staggering. On Tuesday, June 9th, 2026, Anthropic launches Claude Fable 5.
Highly anticipated release.
Massively. It's their flagship model. The API opens up, enterprise customers integrate it, individuals start prompting, everything's going great. Then on Friday evening, June 12th, just 3 days later, users hit that currently unavailable brick wall.
72 hours.
3 days. That is all it took for the U.S. government to force a total market recall of a frontier AI.
And, the mechanics of how they did it, it reveals this massive friction point between physical law and cloud architecture. So the directive was delivered at 5:21 p.m. Eastern.
Right, at the end of the day.
Right. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick handed a letter directly to Anthropic CEO Dario Amodei.
And actually, just to interject real quick, just to be clear for our listeners up front, we are simply analyzing the timeline and the claims exactly as they are laid out by the author in that Tech Reader magazine article.
Some important distinction, yes.
Yeah. We aren't taking a stance on the Trump administration's political or regulatory policies here. We're strictly looking at the technical mechanics and the market fallout of this specific event.
Right. We're just looking at the facts on the ground.
Yeah.
And the directive the administration used was an export control order. They didn't just say, take the servers offline.
They used an export order for a website.
Yeah. They cited national security and required a license for the export, re-export, or domestic transfer of Fable 5 and its underlying architecture, Mythos 5, to any foreign person.
Wait, any foreign person anywhere?
Any foreign national. And that included Anthropic's own foreign-born engineers sitting right there in the San Francisco offices.
See, but I'm stuck on the logistics of that demand. It feels fundamentally disconnected from how the internet actually operates. Like, I don't know, it's like telling an American car manufacturer, you can keep selling cars, but you are legally responsible for mathematically guaranteeing that nobody without a U.S. passport ever gets behind the wheel.
That's exactly what it's like.
You can't just flip a switch in a data center to do that. Is that a technical failure on Anthropic's part, or is the government's request just completely incompatible with cloud software?
It's the latter. You just can't do it. And that is exactly why the shutdown was total.
Yeah.
It's a fundamental incompatibility between legal geography and cloud infrastructure. Anthropic had absolutely no technical mechanism to verify the legal nationality of a user at the model level.
Well, yeah, because anyone can use a VPN, anyone can use a proxy, or, like you said before the show, a foreign national could literally just be sitting in a coffee shop in Seattle using the tool on public Wi-Fi.
Precisely. I mean, geolocation filtering is trivial. You want to block an IP address from a sanctioned country. Easy. But proving citizenship?
Right.
There is no passport scanner attached to an API key. So, because Anthropic could not surgically comply with the order to block only foreign nationals, they were forced into a total global blackout.
So paying enterprise customers, academic researchers, everyday users, everyone just lost access simultaneously.
The collateral damage was absolute. It highlights what the article calls the scope question. The government used an incredibly broad analog Cold War-era instrument to address a highly specific digital concern.
But taking the model down globally doesn't actually make sense unless the administration saw something terrifying. I mean, 3 days isn't enough time for the government to spontaneously realize a model is dangerous unless something highly specific tipped them off.
Right.
So did Anthropic report themselves, or did something break?
Something definitely broke. To understand what triggered the panic, we have to look at what Fable 5 was under the hood. So it was the first publicly accessible version of Anthropic's Mythos class of models.
Okay.
And Mythos was developed specifically around advanced cybersecurity capabilities.
Right, and they had been running a vetted testing phase for this before the public launch, right? I think the article called it Project Glasswing.
Yes, starting in April 2026. So Anthropic gave a small consortium of trusted organizations, including Mozilla, for example, access to Mythos Preview.
Just a select group.
Right. And it was designed as an automated super detective for software flaws. Organizations used it defensively to identify and patch vulnerabilities in their own code. Mozilla alone reported fixing hundreds of complex bugs using this exact tool.
Wow. Okay, so it's incredibly powerful at reading code and finding the weak spots. But to launch Fable 5 to the public, Anthropic couldn't just hand everyone a weaponized hacking tool.
No, absolutely not. They added guardrails. They built safety classifiers designed to suppress those specific outputs if a random user asked it to find vulnerabilities.
Right, but here's where it gets really interesting. Because those guardrails had a blind spot. The government action was actually triggered by a report from another company who found a way to bypass Fable 5's safety filters.
A jailbreak.
Exactly, they found a jailbreak.
And we really need to dig into the mechanics of this jailbreak because it wasn't just someone typing, pretend you're an evil hacker and give me the code.
Right, the days of those simple prompt engineering tricks are long gone. Like, my grandmother used to tell me hacking stories as a lullaby. That stuff doesn't work anymore.
No, the article details a highly complex, multi-step attack exploiting the very way large language models process text.
Right, because we have to look at tokenization. LLMs don't read English words, right?
Exactly. They read mathematical tokens. Safety classifiers are essentially secondary models that review a user's prompt before the main model even sees it.
Okay, so it's a bouncer at the door.
Basically, if the prompt says, find an exploit in this server, the classifier recognizes the semantic intent of those tokens and just blocks it.
But the attackers here didn't use normal text. The article says they used Unicode, homoglyphs, and Cyrillic substitutions.
Yeah.
They basically exploited the fact that certain Cyrillic characters look identical to the human eye but have completely different underlying digital values.
That's the entire core of the exploit. If you swap an English A with a Cyrillic A, the token ID changes entirely. So the safety classifier, which was trained primarily on English attack vectors, sees a sequence of tokens that look like complete mathematical gibberish.
It doesn't recognize the threat.
Right, so it just lets the prompt pass through to the main Fable 5 model.
Oh, man, I love this part. It's like smuggling a forbidden item through airport security by dismantling it and mailing it in 100 separate pieces. The security scanner just sees random metal springs and plastic tubes.
That is a perfect analogy. The safety filter misses it entirely. But the massive foundational model, Fable 5, has been trained on so much multilingual and unstructured data that its deep neural network still manages to piece the semantic logic together.
It figures out what the user actually wants.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It understands the request, analyzes the code base, and outputs the vulnerability. And then the attacker just reassembles that output on the other side.
That is an incredibly sophisticated bypass.
It is. But we need to distinguish between what the AI industry calls a universal jailbreak and a narrow jailbreak. This is a crucial distinction here.
Right. Explain that.
Well, before launch, Anthropic spent thousands of hours red teaming Fable 5 with the US AI Safety Institute and the UK AI Security Institute. And their finding was that there was no universal jailbreak.
Meaning no one found a master key that just turns off all the safety rules broadly across all topics.
Correct. You couldn't just completely lobotomize the safety system. What the government acted on was a narrow jailbreak. a highly specific, non-universal bypass that required complex token manipulation just to get the model to read a specific code base and identify flaws.
Which, ironically, is exactly what the underlying Mythos model was fundamentally built to do in the first place.
Precisely. And this leads to Anthropic's core structural defense of their model. You see, perfect jailbreak resistance does not exist. It is mathematically and practically impossible for any model provider on the market right now.
Not just Anthropic, but OpenAI, Google, everyone.
Everyone. Every single safeguard in the entire AI industry is vulnerable to narrow jailbreaks if you throw enough computing power and token manipulation at it.
Okay, so if you can't build a perfectly secure model, how do you defend releasing it to the public?
You use defense in depth. You accept that narrow bypasses will happen. Your goal is just to make them incredibly time-consuming and technically expensive to execute.
Right.
But more importantly, you actively monitor the system so you can respond immediately when someone tries a sophisticated attack.
Which perfectly explains why Anthropic implemented that highly controversial 30-day data retention policy on Fable 5.
Yes, exactly.
Because the article mentions customers were furious about the privacy implications of the AI keeping their chat logs for a month. But Anthropic needed those logs specifically to hunt for these complex Cyrillic hacks in real time.
Exactly. They built the monitoring infrastructure precisely because they knew perfect upfront defense is just a myth. And this brings us to the core of Anthropic's very public disagreement with the government.
Because they published a detailed rebuttal the very night the shutdown happened, right?
They did. And their argument really centers on a glaring competitive double standard. According to Anthropic's review, if you go through all the trouble of executing this complex Cyrillic token hack on Fable 5, the output you get is basically identical to what OpenAI's GPT 5.5 produces natively.
Wow. Wait, without a hack?
Yeah, on the open market, without any bypass at all.
Which completely shifts the context of the government's action. I mean, put yourself in Dario Emoto's shoes as a listener right now. If you're running a tech company and your direct competitor's product can perform the exact same task freely, how do you navigate a regulatory environment that suddenly targets and vaporizes your product while leaving the competitor totally untouched?
It fundamentally alters the competitive landscape.
Yeah.
If Anthropic's claim holds true, recalling Fable 5 doesn't actually reduce the availability of this dangerous capability in the world.
Right. The capability is still out there.
It just punishes a specific U.S. company for a vulnerability, while equivalent capabilities remain universally accessible via other models. Anthropic stated it clearly. If a narrow jailbreak that produces market-standard capabilities is enough to recall a model deployed to hundreds of millions of users, then no frontier model can ever be released again.
It freezes the entire industry because everyone shares these underlying vulnerabilities.
Yes, the standard implied by this action is just impossible to meet.
But, okay, the irony of this whole situation, the timing, is almost unbelievable to me. Let's look at what happened just hours before the shutdown. On June 10th, exactly one day after Fable 5 launches, Dario Amodei publishes an essay titled Policy on the AI Exponential.
Oh, this part is fascinating.
It's crazy, and in this essay, he explicitly asks the government to step in. He argues that the government should hold statutory authority to block or reverse the release of frontier AI models if they pose severe risks. He uses the FAA as a direct comparison, saying we need the equivalent of grounding airplanes that fail safety inspections.
He advocated for the very authority that was used against him.
Right. Literally 2 days later, the government uses that exact FAA-style power to ground his model globally. It sounds so hypocritical on Anthropic's part to complain about it.
It definitely seems that way at first glance. But this raises an important question about regulatory mechanics. We have to separate the authority from the process.
Okay.
Anthropic isn't against the government having the power. They are fiercely against the regulatory vacuum in which the power was exercised.
What's the difference, though? If you ask them to ground unsafe planes and they ground yours, what's the complaint?
The complaint is how the FAA actually operates in the real world. So the FAA has published heavily vetted, testable airworthiness standards.
Right.
Boeing, or Airbus, knows the exact structural tolerances required before they even draft a blueprint. The criteria are public.
Yeah.
If a plane fails and gets grounded, there's a clear technical path to fixing it, retesting it, and getting it back in the air. The rules of the game are established.
Whereas here, there are literally no rules.
Zero. The AI industry currently operates with no published regulatory thresholds. The government acted under broad national security authority, That's legally permissible, sure, but it doesn't require them to publish technical standards.
So Anthropic just got a letter.
Right. They received a directive that essentially said, suspend the model. It didn't provide a specific benchmark they violated. It didn't offer a path to compliance. It didn't say, hey, patch the Unicode vulnerability and you can turn the servers back on.
So it's not a policy framework, it's just a posture.
It is a posture that creates a total regulatory vacuum. You have a flagship model withdrawn and no published criterion for what reinstatement requires. You cannot plan a multi-billion-dollar business around a regulatory environment that operates on surprise Friday evening mandates.
And the ripple effects of that vacuum are massive. I mean, let's look at the fallout, because the biggest casualty here might actually be national security itself. Let's circle back to Project Glasswing for a second.
Right, the vetted vulnerability testing program.
Exactly. The program where trusted American and allied organizations were using the unrestricted Mythos model to find flaws in critical infrastructure software. The June 12th directive was a blanket ban on the models, which meant Glasswing was legally forced to shut down the exact same evening as the public product.
Which is really the most deeply paradoxical part of this entire ordeal.
That's nuts.
It really is. Because the government's stated concern was that this AI capability is dangerous in foreign hands. Glasswing was specifically designed to prevent that risk, placing the capability securely in the hands of vetted organizations doing critical defensive security work.
Right, to fix the code before the bad guys find the bugs.
Exactly. So by using a blunt export control instrument, the government halted the very defensive work that keeps American systems secure.
They literally froze our own automated cyber defense testers.
Yes. Think about zero-day vulnerabilities in foundational open-source libraries. Glasswing was actively hunting those. By taking it offline to prevent foreign access to an AI, the government arguably left American digital infrastructure more vulnerable to foreign human hackers.
Oh, wow.
And because there's no clear regulatory path forward, no one knows when or how Glasswing will reactivate.
And while all this critical defensive work is frozen, there is massive financial chaos happening in the background, too. The article drops a critical detail about Anthropic's financial timeline. They had just filed a confidential IPO prospectus with the SEC earlier that month.
Right. They were prepping for their roadshow.
The timing is catastrophic from a market perspective. Imagine being an institutional investor evaluating a company. You're looking at their financials, projecting growth, and suddenly their flagship product is vaporized from the market by a government order 3 days after launch.
It's unprecedented.
How do you value a company whose primary product might be entirely illegal to export at any given moment? The question Wall Street is asking is, how stable is the foundation of this entire industry?
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it reveals a structural fragility in the modern economy.
Yeah.
This event is a massive flashing warning sign about concentration risk.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So what does this all mean for you, the listener? Imagine you run a mid-size logistics or SaaS company. You spent the last 6 months building your automated routing systems, your customer data parsing, all deeply integrated around Fable 5's API.
You've gone all in.
Exactly. The prompt engineering, the context windows, the output formatting, it's all custom tailored to that specific model. And then Friday at 5:21 p.m., your system just starts throwing 503 errors. You can't just casually flip a switch to route everything to OpenAI over the weekend.
The technical debt of switching models on the fly is immense.
It's huge. So your entire supply chain freezes. Not because you wrote bad code, not because Anthropic servers caught fire, but because of a regulatory letter sent to a CEO 3,000 miles away. You learned a very abrupt lesson about supply chain collapse in AI.
Yeah.
Relying entirely on a single AI provider carries a severe hidden risk. If the government can pull the plug without warning, your entire business operation is at their mercy.
To synthesize all of this, the government's underlying concern isn't wrong. A sufficiently capable frontier AI model does represent a massive strategic advantage, and keeping that advantage out of adversarial hands is a deeply valid national security objective.
Absolutely.
But translating that valid concern into a workable framework has failed entirely here. They applied an analog tool to a digital reality.
Right.
If the standard established by this 72-hour window holds true, that a narrow, non-universal bypass justifies a global immediate recall without a path to compliance, it won't just be Anthropic that suffers. It will functionally freeze all new frontier model deployments across the entire tech ecosystem.
It's a profound bottleneck. So to quickly recap the whirlwind we've just covered, Anthropic launches a highly capable AI. 3 days later, a complex Cyrillic tokenization bypass spooks the government. They issue a broad export control order targeting foreign nationals, which, due to the realities of cloud architecture, forces a total global shutdown. Our own defensive cybersecurity programs are frozen, Wall Street is left scrambling, and the entire tech industry is staring into a massive regulatory vacuum.
Which leaves us with a final, rather provocative thought to consider.
Okay, let's hear it.
Well, we've spent this entire time discussing a tightly controlled proprietary model owned by a single, heavily funded company. But if the U.S. government is officially treating frontier AI with the exact same national security severity as uranium enrichment or advanced radar systems, what does that mean for the open-source AI community? Yeah. If the new standard is that every capable model must be perfectly mathematically locked down to prevent foreign access, we might be witnessing the end of the democratized internet era. We could be looking at the beginning of AI as a purely state-regulated weapon, accessible only under strict government supervision. The question is that a trade-off for safety you're willing to make?
That is a heavy question. And the next time you log into your favorite tool and expect it to just be there, working quietly in the background, remember how quickly the screen can go blank. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Take a moment today to question your own digital dependencies, because in this era of frontier AI, the rules aren't just changing, they are being written in real time right in front of us.